Well, I disagree with that.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. It is another Patreon week. We can't get through them all. We give you so much here in this channel. This time it is Split Ends band from New Zealand, the Finn brothers. In the States, Neil Finn probably more well known for his next band after Split Ends, Crowded House. But we're getting to dig back into the past before Crowded House and see what was up with that time. Tim Finn, more the leader of this band, I think. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. 9 records, kind of a confusing history. Their debut record is called Mental Notes, and then they re-recorded some of the songs from that and put it on the second album. And then in the States, they released it as the same title, Mental Notes, while in the rest of the world, it's called Second Thoughts. And then there's weird alternate titles for other records, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. So we're going to do our best. I think we got it right. We will find out. We're going to go one at a time. You guys have any history with Split Ends before this dive?
I know 2 songs. I think America knows I Got You because it's the only one they'll play in America. But somebody in the Patreon clued me in on one other song, and that's it. So I had no idea what to expect from this band at all.
I'm with Joe. I had no clue. I know a good bit of Crowded House, but didn't know that this other band even existed. Like, totally ignorant.
So I have True Colors on vinyl with the cool laser etched side 2. And I listened to Time and Tide for the 82 deep dive, and one of the songs from that actually made my top 25 of the year. So that's all I know, though. Everything else is blind spot. So, all right, who's kicking it off?
I'll kick it off. Why not? I didn't look at any lists, or I have no idea what the expected kind of ranking is here. So I thought the last one, number 9, was pretty obvious. I've got Second Thoughts, the follow-up to the debut. I've got it at 2.5. You had Phil Manzanera of Roxy Music fame producing. But the problem here is it's just a confusing collection of reworkings. Like, who reworks the songs from their album they just did? So peculiar. There's definitely some stuff that I do like on it. I like the opener, Late Last Night. It's a bit McCartney-esque granny rock for my ability to really love it. But I do like the vocals a lot. It often kind of reminds me of John Anderson, especially like on Walking Down a Road. I like the ripping bass on that track, and the piano is just killer. Like, they're definitely pretty cool musicians, and they have a lot of creativity. That's their strength. And they use a lot of different instruments. I mean, you get piano, synth, sax, guitar, but it's just, not a full, rich experience because you're getting all of those reworkings. It's so unnecessary. I think Sweet Dreams is pretty nice. It's upbeat and incredibly warm and inviting. It's got a bit of like a Cat Stevens kind of vibe. Matinee Idol is cool. There's a grandeur to this album that I kind of dig, but overall it's really just missing some meat on the bones with all the reworkings, and doesn't really also the originals don't take a real big leap.
Well, I disagree with that. My number 9 is going to be the final album, See Around. And at this point, the band knew they were breaking up. They were going to do one more. This doesn't have any Tim Finn on it. He had gone off and done a solo career. So it's just Neil. And at this point, he's already, his mind is on Crowded House or whatever. I don't know if he even knew he was going to be in Crowded House or if he's going to have another band, but he knew he was going to do something else after this. So what you get with See Around is just a very slick, kind of obviously 80s sounding pop record with some fancy sound effects and slinky guitars. And it is just generic, anonymous city. There's no personality at all in this. Nothing interesting here. The songwriting is just ultra boring, and like all the personality. And that's one thing they had a really interesting sound, and they had another interesting sound after that. And at this point, it's just generic city. So Nothing really interesting or worthwhile to come back to, and I have it at 2 stars.
All right. Well, I don't go that low for any of these. My lowest is at 3 stars, and it is the penultimate album, Conflicting Emotions. This one was produced by Hugh Padgham, Mr. Gated Reverb. And this is right after the first Tim Finn solo album. So Tim has already embarked on this solo career, but he is on this one. And I think this is where you start to feel the tensions creeping into the band. There's more drum machine. Tim wanted to bring in Ricky Fattar of Beach Boys fame to play drums, and he's on one track, I think, Message to My Girl, which is one of the album's strongest tracks. But the rest of it is just kind of dull, not a lot of energy, kind of veers a little towards adult contemporary at times with a track like The Devil You Know. I think the production is pretty lousy at times, especially coming from someone like Hugh Padgham, who has a pretty good track record. I don't think this record sounds all that great. A song like I Wake Every Night, I think, has potential to be really good. It's just not presented in a way that highlights any of the good things about it. And I feel that way about a lot of this record. It just feels like the tensions within the band on this one feel palpable, and it's seeping into the music, and it's just not as fun as everything that came before it. So 3 stars. Some nice tunefulness. They're great with melodies. They know how to write a really strong melody. So even at their worst, I think they're pretty decent, but this is the bottom for me.
All right, my number 8 is the final record, See You Around. And Joe said I think he said it was kind of boring or plain. I think their style and the sound and their vibe is never boring because they have such a unique, like, oddness about them. But in their own realm, this is very much like their basic by the numbers kind of phone it in record. I feel like it opens with some super kind of pop sensibilities with Breaking My Back, but very simplified, clear cut, catchy chorus. I Walk Away was the big hit off here. I don't really think it's that great, to be honest. I think Dr. Love is kind of cool. You get some pretty cool backing vocals. Stuff's getting a little like romantic and seductive at times, but I feel like a lot of the stuff isn't as fun or crazy or zany. Um, it's still kind of naturally interesting and a little odd, but they're not going far enough with it. Like you can tell their passion's just not here for this album. And their sound, which is, throughout the 80s, always slightly updated. Here, I think just kind of hits a wall. Like there's nothing really interesting going on. And there's some duds. I don't really think they have a lot of bad songs in their catalog, but I think like years go by. It's pretty lousy. I think there's a lot of like kind of basic 80s like montage cheese in here. I think Voices falls in that category. So does Kaya Kaya, Kia Kia, whatever. So I just don't think it's their best stuff. It's a bit flat for them, not very inventive for them, and it's my number 8.
My number 8, I'm gonna go with, and this one I saw like high up on some people's lists. So I've like Ramsey said, I have no idea what the accepted like ranking for any of these are. But my number 8 is going to be Frenzy, and this one it's tough for this one because it was a YouTube only listen, and those always suck. Like it's really hard to get what a band's going for, and it sounds always probably worse than it really does because the rip, you never know what you're gonna get. But for me, this one is like stuck between that art rock. When they started out, they sounded like Roxy Music meets Genesis. And I think at this point, they're moving away from that sound into more pop. But I just don't think they found like a good balance here. The ballads are a little maudlin. The production seems worse. Could have been YouTube, however. And the cool instrumental excesses that really, made me dig some of the early albums are gone. And they haven't replaced that with those big hooks yet. I think Neil's probably still trying to find his footing as far as a songwriter goes. He's in the band finally. He joined a couple of years before, but kind of working his way in. And for me, this one is just sort of like an awkward transition between the two worlds, the two halves. So I didn't get much from this one, but again, it could have just been YouTube.
All right, my number 8, all three of us have this in the bottom 2. I have See Around, the final record. This is after Tim Finn's departure. Neil only had like an EP's worth of material, which are the first 5 songs. So it's major front loaded, and it's basically considered by a lot of people to be like the proto Crowded House album. I think it's a step up from Conflicting Emotions. I think I Walk Away is a pretty darn good pop song. But then there's some filler. The quality of the songs varies a lot on this record. I think there's some good stuff, but also some of the weakest stuff they ever did is on here. And it just doesn't really feel done. I don't really know if it was like, I would assume probably like a contractual obligation type of thing where Tim's gone, but we still owe a record, so we have to get something together. I don't know that for sure, but I don't know. Some of the tension seems to be gone. Like it's a little bit lighter feeling than Conflicting Emotions, which is, I think, the biggest strength of it. But it's only marginally better, I'd say. It feels a little unfinished, a little rushed, a little like just thrown together to get the band wrapped up. And yeah, 3 stars for this one too.
Well, I'm already up to 3 stars here for number 7. So there are 7 of these albums I liked. I enjoyed this week. I've got Time and Tide, 3 stars. Number 7, it's a nice, light, fun album. Quirky and highly entertaining. A bit of a thinner sound on this album, I think. And I kind of like that. I kind of even think some of these, I think this is 1982. I think a little bit of the style and sound is kind of ahead of its time, even. I think Dirty Creature is a really cool opener, some great playing on it. And I kind of like that at this point in time, their music is getting a little colder and just like kind of icier at times. I think you get that with Giant Heartbeat. I prefer the livelier stuff on this album, like Hello, Sandy Allen and Take a Walk. I love the chorus and Never Ceases to Amaze Me. Like they write really good melodies, really catchy stuff, but it's not like big 80s pop bombastic stuff. Like it's a lot more challenging and more subtle, which I think is really cool. But I do think this album suffers a little bit where I love their zaniness and I love how peculiar they can be. But at times on this album, it gets a little too goofy for me. Like Lost for Words is too much B-52's kind of vibe, which I can't get into. And then just kind of like the weird like circus stuff and outro and 6 months in a leaky boat. But like the majority of their stuff, I think it's challenging, fun, interesting, maybe not quite as sharp or memorable as some of the other stuff preceding it. But I still liked it. Number 7, Time and Tide.
All right, my 7 is going to go back to the beginning. Mental Notes. This is an interesting album because I just had no idea what to expect, and I had no idea that they were such like an art rock. I don't want to say like wannabe Roxy music, but they definitely want to be Roxy music, especially Phil Judd, who got that goat thing going on. I think that's him because the goat goes away when he goes away. But he's, that really obviously Brian Ferry kind of, inflection in his vocals. There's probably some like 10cc in there, definitely some Genesis. Once they kind of, once it opens up, there's a lot of like longer instrumental passages where it's very, it's not like prolific with like these ridiculous guitar solos, but it's a lot of really nice playing, a lot of, classically inspired synths and keys, some, great bass work, some great drum work. I just don't think they have like the sound yet. I think they're working on it. And I think I totally disagree with Cramser. I think everything sounds so much better on second thoughts that this one feels more like an afterthought at this point, because I'd rather listen to everything on second thoughts than this one. Some good, the roots are there, but I just don't think they totally balance it out, and they're just trying a little too hard to be Roxy music. But I like the eccentricity, the kind of kookiness. Could have been, this is an album that I think could have been really good, and maybe they get to really good on the next album. But it just settles for good because they don't quite know what to do yet.
Good shout on the Brian Ferry. Like to me, in those first 2 albums, when they're more proggy and art rock, especially the vocals sound like every single other, like he sounds like Geddy Lee, John Anderson, sounds like Phil Collins, sounds like Peter Gabriel. Like it's crazy how that's all mashed up to me.
All right, my number 7, going with the same one that Cram had in the 7 hole. Time and Tide. One review that I read of this referred to it as their most mature statement to date. And often what that means is that all the quirkiness and unique stuff is sanded away, and that is what happens here. There's some really good melodies, but it's not as fun as it was on the previous few records. I think Cram said it wasn't as sharp, and that's what it feels like. It's the melodies aren't as sticky, it's not as catchy. Giant Heartbeat and Hello Sandy Allen, I think, are both really cool near the front of the record. And then there's like this weird kind of lull where they're almost trying to be like, I don't know, pseudo funky or something. I don't know what's going on, but the songs are kind of boring and it doesn't really feel like them. And then you get to 6 Months in a Leaky Boat, which is just, I think, amazingly awesome. I love that song. I think it's fantastic. That's the track that made my top 25 in the 82 videos. And I think really what ends up happening is that song comes along and kind of makes you realize how dull everything before it had been. The whole record just kind of opens up and it's like a light through the clouds or something. So I don't know, like during the 82 dive, I put this at a 3.5 and I'm leaning more towards 3 stars now. I still have it at a very light 3.5, but I'm kind of torn on it. I might drop it down to 3. For now, it's at a low 3.5. 6 Months in a Leaky Boat, though, is undeniably great and might be worth the half star alone.
I deny its greatness, but I can also see why. Like, there's probably just, I could eventually love it one day. There's just one thing that's missing it for me. My number 6, I've got Connecting Emotions. I kind of like the hostility and bitterness seeping through here. I've got it at 3 stars. And but however, at this time, like, I feel like they don't really alter their sound and style too much after the first couple records. So doing this chronologically, by this time, some of the magic is kind of wearing off, but there's still really strong stuff on here. You get some really cool new experimentations, like the beat and percussion on Working Up an Appetite. I think the opener is very bad, though. Straight Old Line, I'm not a fan of. That guitar part screams, "Your call is very important to us." Like, it's just like the typical music you hear when you're on hold with the cable company. It one of the low points of this whole thing. There's nothing really bad on it after Straight Old Line. I do like I think Jason mentioned Message to My Girl, which kind of sticks out a little bit to me. It's a song I haven't really done before. It's like incredibly slow and wavy. It's very cool. There's a nice sensual craft to it. To me, the meat of this album is right in the middle, where you get the best stuff like Our Day and No Mischief, which are like really like pressing and cool and icy and dangerous sounding. I didn't really care for I Wake Up Every Night. I have a note that it's Billy Joel trying to be the police, which I remember Billy Joel was trying to do the police, so that makes obvious sense to me. So I still liked it. I got it 3 stars, but it doesn't have like those big memorable moments that I want. So it's my number 6.
When Tim Finn gets into ballad mode, he sounds exactly like Billy Joel, and it's really weird. It's like scary, uncanny. My number 6, I'm with you guys on Time and Tide. You got Hugh Padgham coming in, and that should be a good thing from at least my perspective. I like his production work. And it starts off well with Dirty Creature, Giant Heartbeat, Hello Sandy Allen, all pretty darn solid songs. I really like Sandy Allen. It's super poppy. Got some great drumming on that song and throughout the catalog. But to me, this album feels like they're trying to like capitalize on the success they've had and like make their like pop statement, and a lot of the personality kind of gets zapped out of it. It just feels a little too much like other things here in the early 80s, a little too standard production, clean. Like, it's just very clean, and it has some of that kookiness and zaniness, but I don't know, at this point they're just not that interesting, I think. And I think what they tried to do on this album just doesn't quite work for them. It's more of a Crowded House kind of thing. And this, there's a couple like weird instrumentals with Pioneer from Eddie Rayner. And Log Cabin Fever is kind of weird. I like 6 Months in a Leaky Boat a lot. I like Hello Sandy Allen. Dirty Creature's good. You got some like Zolo rhythms and stuff, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel as interesting and fun and unique as some of their early stuff. So I haven't been giving my star ratings, but this is a 3.5, like Mental Notes and Frenzy was a 3. So I'm at a mid 3.5 for Time and Tide, but it's not special, I don't think.
All right, my number 6 is Dysrhythmia, produced by Jeff Emmerich and the band. Big turnover here in personnel, 3 guys out and 3 new guys in. It's not as prog anymore, but it's not exactly new wave yet either. And I was trying to think of like what exactly it feels like. And at times it kind of sounds like Wings, and at other times it kind of sounds like early Sparks. I think they're kind of lacking a little bit of an identity here. And I think there's some growing pains with all the new personnel changes. And I think it's probably not Jeff Emmerich at his best. I think the record doesn't sound as good as the previous record. It's not as vibrant. I don't think the songwriting is quite as strong. It is good. I like it, but it's also like disappointing at the same time because I really like Second Thoughts. There's some good stuff here. I think My Mistake is really good, and without a doubt, I think is pretty decent. But overall, I think generally this record feels a little bit like growing pains kind of between the two phases of the band for me. So 3.5, good, but yeah.
All right, my number 5, I've got the proggiest one they got. I got Mental Notes, the debut. I like the vocals a lot. You get, like I was saying, those Phil Collins era Genesis albums from the first couple, late Peter Gabriel. You get some John Anderson vibes. He sounds like every single prog vocalist ever. It's very cool. There's some really nice melodicism. I dig the warmish guitar tones that kind of round out the sound. Really cool and unexpected turns in the composition. Like what Joe was saying, like they don't go off the rails with like just showmanship and showcasing and highlighting playing and instrumentation. But the way they craft and the compositions of these songs are just fantastic. I like Under the Wheel a good bit. Love the vocals on it. Good blend of that sparkly, angelic acoustic guitar. Sounds a bit ahead of its time. Sounds like the Church a little bit, even maybe adding in some of those low synth hums. Really nice sound. I like that the musicality like is the show with the composition. Like I was saying, there's a lot of emotion behind everything. Nothing's flat. Everything has like a piece of heart or soul behind it. I think Amy is really cute and playful. There's cool guitar work on the bouncy Maybe, which has some really good catchy pop elements thrown into it. Like the riffs and everything are just super cool. There's a lot of stuff that sticks with you. Titus is pretty and quite lovely. And Finn just has such a cool, odd confidence in his style. Spellbound is really cool. Sounds like this blissful paranoia. So, yeah, still at 3 stars, but very impressive. It would have been interesting if they kept this more prog art house kind of deal.
Right. My number 5, maybe shocking to some people. I got True Colors at number 5. I don't know. This one I just didn't like as much as maybe the one that came after it. I Got Used Good. It's the only song anyone probably knew coming into this. Solid new wave pop song. And they're pretty much a new wave band at this point. A little synth pop, like a little bit of pub rock and stuff in there. You can hear some Elvis Costello and Graham Parker, stuff like that. Not a lot of art rock left in here. A couple, like hints. I Wouldn't Dream of It starts off pretty like standard new wave pub rock, but it has this cool arty fade out, some nice swirling synth lines. Kind of, some of their transition stuff reminded me a little bit of like Breakfast in America, Super Tramp kind of like almost sort of prog, but like not the prog you usually associate with the word prog. You have some weird like angular new wave with How Can I Resist Her, some weird stuff with Shark Attack. I Hope I Never, definitely get some of that Billy Joel vocals in there, almost like a doo-wop Billy Joel style vocal performance. And Nobody Takes Me Seriously, kind of, there's a weird thing about this album that I noticed was like the hook, like in I Wouldn't Dream of It, Shark Attack, I Hope I Never, like they just hammer that same line over and over. It's like, I hope I never, I hope I never. Like they repeat it like 30 times. And they do it a lot on this album, and it's kind of weird. I didn't love that. I feel like there's just not quite enough, adventuresomeness maybe in there. Missing person, some nice jangly guitar. Poor Boy has a nice slick synth line. Kind of reminds me of like Alan Parsons or something. But as a whole, I just didn't enjoy the songs as much as I did on their next album, similar to it. But I don't know. Maybe it's just, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't like this one as much. I just didn't, and it's 3.5 stars.
All right. My number 5 is the similar next album that Joe is referring to. It is Wayada, I think is how you say it. It was originally planned to have a different title in every country that it was released in, but Australia was the only place that adopted that. So in Australia, it is called Korobori, I believe. Terrible, terrible album cover. It's one of the worst album covers I've ever seen. I think it is absolutely disgusting. Just the worst. But anyways, I think it's clearly an attempt to duplicate the success of True Colors. Very similar records. This one, maybe if there's a difference, this one's probably not quite as angular and nervy. It's a little rounder and fuller sounding, I think, but not drastically different. You get 4 Neil Finn songs here, which is the most to this point. He had 3, I think, on True Colors. So I think you can see kind of the gradual passing of the torch, where he's kind of getting more and more control of the band. And I think Neil is really starting to feel like the star of the show on this record. He just has a way with the melody. I think most of his songs are the standouts here. One Step Ahead, History Never Repeats, I think are both great. Those are both Neil songs. Iris, I think, is also pretty solid. Again, a pretty similar album, good songs. I think it's well produced. It's just a tick less energy and excitement on this one. I think there's a real like kinetic kind of like frenzy, even though they have a record called Frenzy. There's kind of a frenzy on True Colors where there's like this, I don't know, like they've stumbled upon something. They're excited about this new direction and they're like really going for it. Here it's a little more refined. It's still good. It's still catchy. It just lacks that like little extra oomph. So 3.5 for Wayada.
All right, I'm going up to 3.5. I really like this album. I have a feeling it's supposed to be the number 1. I've got True Colors at number 4. I think this is their most mainstream kind of radio friendly effort they've done without like objectively being like, we got to get on the radio, we got to get more popular. I think it just kind of happened that way a little bit. I Got You is super cool. It's weird and kind of creepy, but it's so catchy and has such a cool mystique. And I love how it gets kind of super like 80s sweetheart pop with the I Don't Know Why I Get Frightened and just goes back and forth. In and Out of the Shallow is really cool. They have a really cool technique in their songs where they really can change moods from like verse and chorus and pre-chorus and back. Like something can be really kind of like dark and ominous, and then just a little bit of a change, and then the whole disposition is different. It's very cool. Really talented guys, just great vision and craft with their material. Shark Attack is great. I think the percussion is settling in a little bit more, which kind of helps you enjoy the songs a little bit more. Kind of straight up, more like new wave punky, kind of really downhill drumming compared to the other stuff. But I like the stuff on here. I do think it might be a little bit too entrenched in the genre and the time. I think it kills a little bit of their character and creativity, just a little bit. They're still incredibly unique at this point. It's very enjoyable. But yeah, I like it when it's a little bit more unpredictable, a little bit more dense and complex. I think Double Happy is cool, but it's not really that gripping. All the songs are just like little treats for me that I really dig. I do like I Wouldn't Dream of It a good bit. I Hope I Never is very sweet and pretty and a nice breather for the album. And I actually think the second half of True Colors is far better. Nobody Takes Me Seriously is a great side 2 opener, really cool solo. I like the quirky little short story, anecdote style of writing that's happening. Missing Person might be my favorite on the album. Poor Boy is really cool, great synth part. How Can I Resist Her is awesome. You get that little like disco synth stuff at Choral C at the end. So yeah, it's 3.5. I just, from the sound of it, like the other albums more than I maybe should. I don't know. We'll see. 3.5, number 4, True Colors.
All right, my number 4, I got Disrhythmia. This is their first one. It's the shift to pop, I think, begins really with this one. Phil Judd's out of the band. He still has one writing credit, Sugar and Spice. But he's gone. Tim Finn is de facto head of the band. He brings in his brother, Neil, who doesn't have any songwriting credits yet, but he's playing guitar, mandolin. He's doing some vocals. I think Tim Finn's a pretty good songwriter. I think Neil's a better songwriter. So I think they do the pop stuff better elsewhere. But I like this album. I like the production on this. I think Jeff Emmerich, maybe not his best work, but he does a good job of turning them poppier. I really like the sound of the piano, a little Beatlesque throughout here. They still have a little bit of Roxy Music. Parrot Fashion Love still sounds like they want to be Roxy Music a lot. Sugar and Spice, some strong guitar leads. A lot of piano, still some good, not progressive, but sort of art rock tendencies in the instruments. I think they're all played really well. Crosswords has a great driving bass line. Charlie is a big pop ballad, nice little touch of jazz. So they're becoming a pop band. They're bringing in some new influences here. And I think all these songs are good. And I don't know, it just sounds good. I don't love Phil Judd's vocals, so the fact that he's no longer in the band is a plus on that front. Having Tim and Neil, I think, definitely improve the vocals. And Eddie Rayner, the keyboardist, I think probably the undersung hero of this whole week. Just really great piano lines throughout, really great synth lines throughout. And I think he and who's the bass player? Nigel Griggs and Malcolm Green, who does drums, all really shine here. Some good sax and stuff from Robert Gillies as well. So a good showcase for the instrumentals of the band in a pop sphere, and less of the prog and art rock.
All right. My number 4 is the debut Mental Notes, as you guys both have mentioned. Very proggy, big time Genesis vibes on this one. I didn't so much get that much Roxy music on this one, definitely on the next one a lot, but Genesis is mostly what I'm hearing here. I think even though they're like very proggy in this early phase, I think you can still tell fairly easily that their melodic sensibilities are rooted in pop music more than a lot of other prog bands. 4 songs here they re-record for the next record when they get together with Phil Manzanera. I don't know. I think this is a cool record. It's kind of how I like my prog. It's really melodic. It's structured. It's kind of song-centric. It still allows itself to like explore and stretch out, but it doesn't get like bogged down by like long noodly solos. The longest song here is still under 7 minutes. You have some variety with tracks like Amy Darling, which kind of dabbles in some country rhythms, maybe has a nice kind of Beatles-esque bounce to it. And I think the musicianship is pretty strong, and no one's like trying to steal the show, but they're like collectively pulling off these really intricate arrangements, which is cool. I think it could use like a really memorable single or two, kind of like Genesis in their transitional period, but it doesn't have like a follow you, follow me, or it doesn't have a misunderstanding. And I think that's what's missing here. I think it's a really good record. It's just kind of like not super memorable, despite being really enjoyable. So this is a pretty strong 3.5 for me.
Yeah, definitely the Genesis vibes. Top 3, these were all pretty close. I could see all 3 of my top 3 being kind of jumbled around at any point in time, really. But right now I'm putting Disrhythmia still at 3.5. It's an album with a lot of really cool arrangements and production technique and kind of that middle ground of like art rock and a little bit more new wave pop, but still proggy, like kind of brand on it. The sound of this album just really comes at you like a swirling tornado. It's really cool. I really dig My Mistake. I think it's a lot of fun and super catchy. Little bit of glam in the sound, like in Parrot Fashion, great tune. And the sound is a lot richer and more robust. I think this one takes a big leap forward. And it's just a lot of fun. It's incredibly interesting. There's a lot of like angular twists and turns. It's like kind of wild but controlled. And yeah, it doesn't have traditional prog sound, but the prog tendencies in the writing, like what Jason was just saying with mental notes, none of the musicians stand out or take the lead. They all serve the writing just so well. And the writing is the star of the show to me because it's so interesting. And, like that guitar riff halfway through Sugar and Spice is really cool, very memorable, but it's still all about the song. Then you get Crossroads, which is rocking and kind of crazy, very cool. Yeah, it's my number 3, but it could be number 1. 3.5 Dysrhythmia.
For my number 3, I'm jumping up to 4 stars for an album that you guys did not like, but I think is really good. And I read a lot of stuff. People don't like this one because Eddie Rayner brought in a Yamaha DX7 and it has a very specific, like early 80s sound that people do not enjoy. There's drum machines on everything except Message to My Girl, which is played by Ricky Fatar, like Jason mentioned. But I love that like early 80s sound. It's very unique and peculiar. And to me, it just has a specificity in the year it's from that you just never get again. Once that Yamaha kind of goes out of vogue, you never get it. It's the same thing that, it kind of sounds like a Peter Gabriel type instrument. He used that, and someone like Kate Bush stuff. It's just cool to me. I like that sound. And on this, you really get Neil Finn coming to the forefront. He writes 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 out of the 10 songs. And to me, this is like the precursor to Crowded House. See Around is just boring crap. This actually has like that really strong melodies and the really good hooks that you expect from a Neil Finn pen song. I think the bass on this album is awesome. I like Straight Old Line. It's got a nice sophistopop feel to it, some great bass, real jazzy piano part, a little swing. Bullet Brain and Cactus Head is great. Sort of the clash between the classical sounding keys, that 80s, almost hard rock. And when Neil does his like hoarse screaming vocals, I think it sounds awesome. I wish he did that a little bit more. Really unique song in their catalog. Message to My Girl was the hit from it. This sounds exactly like Crowded House to me. Just a killer melody, killer chorus. I just think the synth parts on this whole album are awesome. It's a little more sophisticated, I think, in its pop, a little less frenzied and angular. But I like that. No Mischief. It still has some of that like new wave jitteriness. And there's some nice ballads. I Wake Up Every Night and Devil You Know. And I just think it's a cool album. It's got a very particular early 1980s sound, but I think the hooks are there. And the conflict that Jason didn't like, I like. I like that conflict that kind of sieves behind the music. So 4 stars for conflicting emotions.
Right. My number 3 is Frenzy. Neil starting to sing a little bit more on this record, and it's another step towards their like kind of 80s new wave stuff. The keyboard organ on a track like Icy Red, which actually wasn't on the original first 10,000 copies or whatever, has kind of like a Squeeze-esque or maybe like the Attractions kind of like organ sound, which is really cool. And I think this is kind of this lineup of the band finding their footing a bit after I felt like Dysrhythmia, they were kind of still feeling each other out maybe a little. Master Plan is great, really kind of quirky pop song, which is cool. It's got this really like slow grooving bass line. It's kind of interesting to me how like kind of slow and steady it is, but also how it feels kind of funky at the same time. And it has a really cool outro post-chorus section at the end, which I like. Nigel Griggs, Joe mentioned standing out on this record. Yeah, his bass playing is really great. The title track, as well as Famous People and Hermit McDermott. Nigel Griggs killing it on this record. They didn't like the original mix, so Eddie Rayner remixed it. So there's like different versions of this album out there with different track listings. So it's one of those confusing releases. So beware of that if you're trying to hear the original one. I can see where like the original one does sound a little weak and why he may have wanted to go back and mess with it a little bit, but I thought the songs were strong enough. It didn't really affect my enjoyment of it any, even listening to it on YouTube. I thought it was fine. I heard other people complaining about the way this record sounds, and it's not the greatest sounding record ever, but it's totally passable for me. So 3.5 stars.
3.5 stars. My number 2, I've got Waiata. I don't know. And it's got other names too. But by now they're really immersed in that like 80s new wave vibe. It's very good. It's definitely pop music now, but it's just they, drive on a different road than everyone else. So it's very refreshing pop music. Hard Act to Follow is pretty good. And there's just a really nice blend of everything, even in this pop sensibility of not being watered down by one instrument or one highlight or one thing. Very cohesive sound. So that cohesiveness and the writing for me are just my favorite things about this band. One Step Ahead has that great lead in it and an awesome organ key lead. I think they're starting to really write really cool, memorable parts, not just, the vocal hooks and everything. And yeah, this album is a bit fun. It's a bit challenging, but always engaging. The songs are a bit in the shade a little bit, like starting to get a little bit colder, which I like. But you get offsets like I Don't Want to Dance, which is super poppy and a bit more accessible and light. Iris is solid. Maybe my favorite Iris versus Goo Goo Dolls and versus Live from Throwing Copper. There's a lot. I don't know. Who knows? That'll maybe be a side 3, the best Irises. But yeah, it's very light and fluffy, but still kind of tense. Whale is rocking with that bass and revving everything up. I love the percussion on going into a tailspin. Clumsy is cool. I feel like these songs are what the Police wanted their weird non-hits on Synchronicity to be like, but these songs are much better than the non-singles that the Police were messing around with. History Never Repeats Itself is wide open in the verse and freeing with great vocals, then alternates like I was talking about before, that just like flick of a switch where they can change their disposition. It gets more claustrophobic, really cool. I think the album closes well. It's just really good, challenging, offbeat pop music. And maybe there is a little bit where, like, to me, it's pop music that sounds kind of odd and like a little bit in bizarro world, and that might just be the New Zealand versus US thing. But I really, really dig it, and it's the number 2.
Okay, Doogie. My number 2, I'm gonna go with Second Thoughts. They're sort of re-recording of the first album, which it was the last one I listened to because I didn't realize that, like, on Spotify, on streaming, it's just called Mental Notes, the 2020 version. So I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to go to YouTube for 3 of these albums. Are you serious? No, I found it eventually. And on this one, they go to London. They record with Phil Manzanera. And I mean, I always thought, or I already thought they sounded like Roxy Music a little bit. Now they really sound like Roxy Music. And, having the guitars from Roxy Music will do that. It's, like Talking Heads recording with Brian Eno. Like, you kind of, you record with your hero in the band that you're emulating. You're going to kind of sound like them a little bit. So, but I think it works. I think that mix of Roxy and Genesis really comes together on this. Phil Judd's vocals, he's not doing the goat thing, so that's a big plus. Everybody sounds better. The production sounds amazing. Everything sounds big and rich. And you just have a really cool, unique, I mean, not everything they do is unique, but the mix of their influences of Roxy Music and Supertramp and Genesis, I think, is a very unique blend, and the way they do it is really good. I think they're all strong players. This one has Jonathan Michael Chun on bass, and the bass sounds great. Robert Gillies, that just the little addition of sax and trumpet is excellent. Eddie Rayner's keyboards are awesome throughout. Just really uses them effectively. All the synth sounds and the swirling, psychedelic almost way he puts them in. Something like Stranger Than Fiction has a great guitar solo, very Genesis-like intermingling of synths and guitars. The twisty song structures is great. Time for a Change is gorgeous. Get a little like Procol Harum in the classical sounding keys here. The Woman Who Loves Me, swinging bass line, some horns. It's got that Roxy Music flair to it. And I just love the way all the instruments come together. Some Mellotron on here and Late Last Night. And Eddie Rayner, I think, is the star again with the keys, but I think everybody sounds great. I like Phil Judd a lot as a writer. I think, his stuff, Late Last Night, Titus, which is really cool, folky, Sweet Dreams, Time for a Change. He has co-writes on everything. I think he's a great writer, so I was kind of bummed to see him go, even if I don't love his vocals. Him and Tim, that's sort of like, you can kind of tell like they clash a little bit, but I think it really works for a unique product here on second thoughts. So a strong 4 stars for this one for me.
All right. Well, we have a trifecta of not having True Colors at number 1. It is my number 2. So yeah, this was their big breakthrough record with the big international hit, I Got You. Probably the only Split Enz song that most Americans know. I wouldn't even say most Americans know it. The cool Americans know it. That's it. And Cram doesn't know it, so that's point proven. I don't know. It's tighter. It's a more concise record. It's more cohesive. So I don't think there's any surprise that this was their breakthrough record. Like if you were trying to break through, this would be the record you make. The tracks are bristling with energy. The melodies are right on the surface. You don't have to work to get to them. They like hit you right in the face with the hooks. And I don't know. It's just good. The band talk about this being like a dividing point among their fans, where like some of the early Mental Notes fans kind of took a step back at this point, but I think they do a really good job of making the transition to a more pop sound without losing their artier tendencies. It's still kind of cool and quirky. It's got that nervous energy that I was talking about. The whole thing with this record, there's just no question in my mind that this is, by far has their most memorable melodies of any record of theirs. I think the hooks on this are just super good. I Got You, Shark Attack, What's the Matter with You, I Hope I Never, just to me, those, like you say those track names and I can hear the whole song in my head. They just really stick with you. I think it's a great 80s pop record. I think not that many records from this era, which is one of my least favorite eras of music ever, the first 3 years of the 80s, are as good as this. I've got it at a solid 4 stars, True Colors.
All right. I don't get to 4 stars. My winner is Frenzy, and I've still got a 3.5, which is basically your 4 stars, the two of you. I run a half star short. Really evolved completely into new wave pop here. And like, I kind of really like some of the like Elvis Costello and Jay Giles kind of sensations. You really get that in I See Red. Some just has a lot of energy. It's really interesting. There's a lot of cool angles on it. There's a lot of unexpected turns. There's a lot of like dramatic twists. Give It a Whirl is really cool. Just great modern production. I think it's my favorite. I think it's the liveliest played album and sounds the best, which is why I think the songs are just really potent. Master Plan is really cool. There's just cool versions of oddity pop everywhere. And I can't remember an artist that we've covered that reminds me of so many things, but I think I've made in my notes like at least 30 to 35 other artists that they kind of sound like at times, from Bowie to Genesis to Soft Cell to The Church, like all of this stuff. Like Joe was saying, like there's nothing incredibly unique about it, but just their perspective and their just collage of it all is so cool. The bass didn't talk a lot about, just great everywhere on this album, especially. And just style on everything. Like there's fun, there's funk, there's cockiness, there's cool rhythm changes. It's cool music. That's the best way to say it. The music's cool. Hermit McDermott, so much fun, very cool. I love when they do kind of those like more nerdy kind of sci-fi kind of songs like Marooned. There's just so much character and flavor on this album. It's hard not to love. They take so many risks. They have no inhibitions. The title track is humorous and enjoyable, a good party song, kind of trippy. Roughest, toughest game in the world is there. So like some fans of their older sound of something to grab onto. Just incorporating a little bit of everything they have to offer. it's like reading a magazine. It's just very colorful. There's something new of interest, and it gets to the point really quick. The sing-alongs and like She Got Body, She Got Soul, really good. Yeah, now that I'm talking about it, it might definitely be my number one. I was saying like the top three can kind of be mixed around, but yeah, it's probably Frenzy. So my number one favorite Split Ends record, Frenzy.
Well, we are just all over the place, aren't we? My number one is Waiata. Waiata. Or Korobori, if you're from Australia. For me, this one is just an improvement on everything they did on True Colors, more memorable. The Neil Finn stuff, so much better, so much tighter. Still got that zaniness, hard act to follow, nervous energy, jittery, good Tim Finn song. Then you follow it up with One Step Ahead, which is just a really cool flow. It's got that creepy, mysterious synth line that comes in, like a little classical synth flair, but it also feels modern. I think Kramzer was saying how, they'll do like a verse in one mood and then like shift tonally completely around. And this song, has a lot of that. I Don't Want to Dance, great guitar solo in there, which is a little unexpected. Got that pub rock flair. Iris was another Neil Finn song. It's almost a straight ahead pop song, but really complex keys and synths that really fill out the song. It's a little angular, it's a little synthy. You hear stuff like, Yellow Magic Orchestra and just like, I don't even know who their influences are at this point in 81. It's like the beginning of synth pop, but like, the way they're kind of working it into their own style, I really dig. Clumsy has like an early rock and roll spirit, some jangly guitar, still got that synth pop kind of, going on as well. I think Neil's songs, One Step Ahead, Iris, History Never Repeats, Ships are all fantastic. It's got the two instrumentals, Whale, which I think is really cool sounding. And Albert of India, maybe that's too much, and that's probably what keeps it from 4.5 stars. I have it at a high 4. But I think this is their sweet spot in terms of like the melodicism of Neil, that jittery pub rock, whatever, Tim Finn's doing. And, they're not progressive anymore, but they still have a hint of art rock, pub rock, synth rock, just straight 80s pop. And you can tell these guys are just super talented, even like in a pop restricted type of songwriting. Most of these songs, 250 to 340 or so. So they're all like snappy pop tunes. But I think the bass and the drums and the synths are all immaculate. I think both of them sound really good singing, and songwriting is excellent as well. So high 4 stars for Waiata. I think it's a very good, fun album. Definitely top 15 of 1981. I'm not going to say Split Ends are like my favorite band or anything, but I did enjoy pretty much the whole week. A lot of good tunes in here.
What year is that? 81. That that album cover looks like 1981 AI, and they were just like music album cover, and just like printed out those staff and notes. So bad.
Even the colors are bad, like brown and tan and black. Like it's an ugly cover.
So Joe going with the pop era, Cram going with the transition period. I'm going early with Second Thoughts as my favorite. It was also Cram's bottom, which is interesting when that happens. There's a bunch of rework stuff on here from the first record. And I think they were doing that to just like reintroduce themselves or introduce themselves to international audiences. You get 6 songs from the Mental Notes sessions. 4 of them were actually on Mental Notes. But overall, I think just way more forceful recording on this record, whether that's Manzanera's production or just a bigger budget or a better studio, or they're just getting more confident as a band. I think probably a little of all of that's happening. And the drums and vocals especially just sound way, way better on this record than they do on Mental Notes. And it's not like when you listen to Mental Notes, you really even think like, this sounds bad, or it should be redone or improved. Like, it doesn't even cross your mind. But then you hear this version and you're like, well, yeah, that's so much better. So they didn't have to redo it. I don't think they did it because the recordings were poor. I think they did it just to kind of, like I said, show themselves to a different market. But yeah, I just think improvements all around in the recordings. The new stuff on here, some of my favorite, Late Last Night, Matinee Idol, I think are great. The Woman Who Loves You has some great playing on that one. I think the songs are getting a little closer to pop than the extremely prog leaning stuff on the first album. But to me, it's kind of like a really good blending. I like where this ends up, where I was kind of complaining about like the Mental Notes not having like a nice pop hit to it. And I wouldn't necessarily say that like Late Last Night is on the level of Follow You, Follow Me or anything like that. But it's closer. I think it's catchier. And I don't think it's as heavily prog as maybe people talk about this era of the band being. I think it's pretty catchy, pretty well crafted song wise. So for me, it's the perfect blending of the two sides of the band. I think it's a great middle point. 4 stars. Second thoughts. So nobody like losing their mind over this band. No one throwing out 5 stars or anything, but I think we all seem to have enjoyed it more than we did Cigarros, it seems like.
Oh, for sure. Not game changer for my life, but a very nice, pleasant surprise, pleasant experience.
Yeah. I pretty much enjoyed the whole thing, and I think I'd probably like all of them more if they were physical releases or anything, not on YouTube. Maybe I do need to give Frenzy another shot because it does stick out sort of as a low point, other than See You Around, which sucked. But I'll give Frenzy another shot here because everything else, 3.5 stars and above.
Let us know how we did with this. Going in as blind as we were, there's a good chance that we've upset some hardcore Split Ends fans, but tell us what the standard ranking is. Tell us what your personal ranking is. Let us know what you think of our list. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check out Patreon, website, merch, all that stuff. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.